Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Iris Fox, and I want to extend a warm welcome to the Rough Edges podcast. Rough Edges exists to provide mental health education as well as faith-based messages in order to inspire growth and foster healing. In this podcast, I will guide you through my faith and mental health journey to dispel the stigma surrounding mental illness and to create a voice for those who wish to discover more about these topics. My hope is that this podcast will not only shed light on mental health issues, but will also reveal the intersection between faith and mental illness in order to bring growth and healing in our communities. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Rough Edges. Today, I am joined by a very special guest, Miss Allison Toth. So, Allison is a crisis worker, world traveler, and retreat host with a passion for mental health advocacy and inner child work. She is also the host of the Wishing You Wellness podcast. Welcome, Allison.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. We've been connected for quite a while, and I know we've both been excited to collaborate. And so I'm so happy that the universe is aligned and we are getting together tonight and doing the damn thing.
Yes, I am so excited to get into our topic for today. But before we do that, I want to get to know you a little bit more, Allison. So, what are 3 things that you are passionate about and why?
Yeah, so the first one's going to be crisis work. I'm a crisis intervention specialist with the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, and I'm very passionate about that line of work. I'm very passionate about giving someone a place to go where they feel like there's nowhere else left for them. And so, crisis work really helps me to help people who are in the position that I've been in many times as somebody who struggles with a serious psychiatric condition. So, I see a little bit of myself in each of these callers in crisis, and that really helps me to be more heart centered and like I don't know. I feel like some crisis workers can be a little bit robotic in a way and a little
Mm,
bit too like, you know, systems. And I'm very much like, it's my heart and soul that I'm putting out here because like I know what you're feeling and I know how horrid that feeling is and I don't want you to feel alone. So number one would definitely be crisis work. Number two definitely would be travel all the way. I love to travel to new places far and wide. I move quite a lot. I was just making a joke to the community group call that I was leading before this. I was like, yeah, my mental health actually aligns with my traveling. So like mental breakdown, new state. Crisis, new state. And I'm like, I'm working on that. I'm working on grounding and making those big decisions outside of the crises. But it's been funny watching it up till this point in my life because like anytime I moved, it's like, okay, which breakup was she going through? Like what bullshit was she getting through that she felt the need to pack up all her stuff, throw it in her cart, and drive to California? We don't know. But I recently came back to Missouri, where I'm currently at now. Well, I don't want to get too far off. Okay, my third thing that I'm passionate about. I would say my third one would probably be like, I'm a big supporter of Planned Parenthood. I would say I'm very here for women having access to everything that they need and all of the aspects of healthcare just being in that umbrella. I would say those are my top 3.
all right, nice. I especially love the crisis work and the traveling because honestly, I don't even care what the reason is to travel. If you're just traveling, travel. Like I'm just like a huge proponent of that and I wish I could do it more often, but I just love it and I could feel like the passion that you have through the work that you do and it's just so refreshing to hear someone who actually like, cares about the work that they do and the people that they work with.
Thank you. It's been really an amazing thing. And I think that that's what we're all here on this earth to do is to help each other and to bring each other up and to just be there for each other and support each other. And that's exactly what crisis work gives me the opportunity to do. So I feel very thankful. And I think that also what you do is very important. Having podcasts like this where people can come and know that it's a safe space to talk about things like this, things that are stigmatized, things that are kind of, pushed to the side sometimes. This is such important work too.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, you're literally saving lives, but it's okay.
People are always like, "Thank you for your service." Like I could never do that, and I'm like, sometimes I wonder how I do it. Sometimes I wonder.
Yeah, that's a special type of skill. I I applaud you for that.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, so this season is all about mental health in the media. So before we get into the piece of media that we're going to be discussing today, what is your opinion about the media's portrayal of mental health? Do you think it's accurate or is it bad? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I feel like it's very similar to a lot of things in this lifetime, in that there's no black and white answer. There are
Mhm,
times where the media does a damn good job of representation, and there are times that I look at it and I'm like, oh my gosh, is this really what they think this is like? And so I would say it
mhm,
definitely depends. And I also think that each person will have a different interpretation, because the show that we're going to talk about today, actually, I tried to show another one of my friends who suffers in a similar way that I do, who I thought would resonate. And she watched it and she was like, nope, not for me. It didn't feel accurate. It didn't feel blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, totally, totally hear you. We're all different. We all have a different flow. But I think for
mhm.
me, definitely captured everything. So I'm excited for later in the episode.
Yes, absolutely. No, I agree. It's like the media is just very subjective. And it's like in one moment they could really, really depict it. But then another moment it's just like, oh my gosh, like did you even talk to a person that's dealing with this? Like this is just such an overgeneralized or glamorized type of depiction. And it's just like kind of sad because a lot of people, when they see the media, that's their impression of it. Like it's not, oh, let me talk to this person to find out what it is. It's like, oh, I saw this movie and this person with XYZ is like this. And it's, really unfair when they get it wrong, you know?
Yeah. And I love that this podcast is covering that specifically, because it's like we were saying, this is something that I think we've needed for a long time and we haven't had. Like, I've heard podcasts about mental health tips or mental health advocacy, but there hasn't really been a podcast that's caught my attention that's like, we're going to dive into the media and all of the different TV shows and the movies and the different portrayals.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm also a big like movie show buff anyway. So I'm like, why can't I just incorporate this into the podcast, So yeah, but it is an important topic because it's like a lot of people, their first like exposure is through a movie or a show, and it doesn't really like show them an accurate like portrayal of what a person with that mental health condition is going through. And I'm like, no, we need to discuss this because there are some bad portrayals out there, but there are some good ones that get overlooked because the bad ones are so bad?
That is so true. I relate to that so much. I have a few favorite movies that are all like mental health related. And I think sometimes like recognizing that no portrayal is going to be perfect is helpful,
Mhm.
because if you look at a character in a movie and you want them to be exactly like you're not looking for the same diagnosis, you're looking for your carbon clone, which
Yeah,
isn't realistic and isn't going to happen. And so if you can recognize little parts of yourself in the character instead of trying to completely identify, that's also just better in general, because like I don't know, I used to really struggle with over identifying and being like that's my life, that's who I am. And then we start telling these stories and then that's all it is.
right, right. No, I definitely agree with that. But I am super, super anxious to get into our topic for today. So, we are talking about a show called Crazy Ex Girlfriend. And guys, when I tell you this show is just like amazing, it's amazing. Like, I'm kind of biased, maybe. But it was a show that was on the CW, and now it is streaming on Netflix, like the full series. And just before we get into the synopsis, I do want to give a warning. We are talking full spoilers for Crazy Ex Girlfriend. So if you haven't seen it yet, please pause the podcast, go watch a few episodes, and
Same here.
yes, it's just like come back and listen to our thoughts about it. But really quickly, the synopsis is successful and driven Rebecca Bunch, played by Rachel Bloom, seemingly has it all: an upscale apartment in Manhattan, a partnership at a prestigious law firm, but she feels like something is missing. After a chance meeting with former romantic interest, Rebecca impulsively decides to give up her life in New York and relocate to West Covina, California, a Los Angeles suburb she hopes will be the perfect home base as she embarks on a quest for love, adventure, and true happiness. So I'm gonna ask you, Allison, like, with the show, like you've seen the show, and what were like 3 moments or maybe 3 or 4 moments that were your favorite, like absolute favorite from the show?
Yeah. Let me think from the beginning. That's going to be the most helpful. Okay. So I would say Rebecca and Greg's breakup, I was just telling you, was such a heart wrenching moment. But I also feel like I have never related to something more. Like the one good guy that came along during my life at that point, I did the exact same thing that she did and was just like horrible to him. And so seeing him leave and like just seeing her finally realizing the weight of her actions on other people, that was a very relatable scene. I also think that the scene where she gets her diagnosis, they do an incredible job depicting pink cloud. And pink cloud is
Mm.
basically this euphoric high that people get right at the beginning of recovery. That could be for addiction, that could be for personality disorder or anything. And you basically just feel like really, really good and really positive, and you have this great outlook, and everything's going to get better and it's going to be fine. And eventually, inevitably, the pink cloud will wear off and you'll kind of have to go back to reality and fighting those demons. But for a moment, you're just like, yes, I've got it sorted. And Rebecca kind of goes through that. She gets her diagnosis and she runs around singing this song. Like, I got my diagnosis, I'm fixed, like now I can take these medicines and I'm gonna be completely better. And that's when she kind of finds out that she actually has to do work in therapy and outside of therapy if she wants to make those changes. So that is definitely the second one. Third one would definitely be when she sings The Darkness. I think that is the best song in the series. It is
Mhm.
gut wrenchingly relatable. It's just her singing about the hole in her heart, the hole in her soul. That is borderline personality disorder, and what that feels like to have that like empty feeling. And I live with both bipolar and BPD. And so as she was doing this, I was like, man, I can really resonate. And I love that she sings the song in a POV like it's an ex-boyfriend. Like she literally names the darkness Tyler, and she's like, "That's my ex boyfriend Tyler that drunk dials me. He calls me slut, like all of these things." And she's just singing to the darkness and being like, "Yeah, that's always been here. It's always followed me everywhere I go." And I feel like that one was just such a like, ooh, chills. Like somebody else has felt this way. And when she sings it live, Rachel Bloom is even like, when we wrote this song, like we didn't know how it was going to go over. And then so many of you guys reached out and were like, this made sense. This resonated. I felt so seen and understood by this. And so those are probably my top three. But I'm very curious now to hear yours too.
Oh man, like you took 2 of them. I'm not gonna lie, but like I would definitely say The Darkness is definitely um one of like my favorite moments. Not because like she was going through that, but because it just accurately just shows like, okay, this is what someone with like a deep dark type of depression is going through. It's just like, okay, I keep revisiting this moment even though I don't want to. It's like no matter how much progress I make, it seems like I'm always coming back to my ex, Tyler Darkness, you know? And, yeah. And so I really like appreciated that. And just that whole episode as a whole, like, just leading up to that point where she's just like trying to see if she could just get over it without medication, without going to group therapy. Cause at that point, she's like, okay, I've tried it for a little bit and it's not working for me. So I'm just gonna stop, live my life, and see where it goes from there. And I was like, yo, this is so relatable because I've done that so many times where it's like, hey, I think that I am good. Like, like I don't want this anymore. Yeah.
And it's that exact second when the universe is like, bam, bam, and you just get like knocked down a notch and you're like, oh, that's why we stay in therapy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So that was very relatable. And another moment like you mentioned where she was just like trying to navigate her diagnosis for the very first time, and I found it interesting that she had a pink cloud moment because it brought me back to when I had first got diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I was like, this is a dark cloud. Like I'm not feeling happy. I'm not feeling like the world makes sense. Like I'm just feeling like, dang, like I have this now. What do I do? Like why do I feel like this? Like how do y'all think I have this? So it was just like a whole bunch of like feelings, but I just love like that optimism that she had, even though she thought like for so long she's been struggling with something that she couldn't put a name to. And then when she finally got, like, the diagnosis, she's just like, "Oh wow, it makes sense. Like the things that I've been going through now have a name to it and I have information about it that I didn't have before." And I kind of feel that way now looking back at like being diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Like even before I was diagnosed, there were so many times where I could pinpoint like, yeah, maybe I was hypomanic or maybe I was depressed, and I was like, yeah, now that I have this diagnosis, it makes sense now.
How old were you when you got your diagnosis, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, so I was 21.
Mhm. I feel like
Yeah.
at that point in your life, it becomes obvious that this isn't a teenage, like, phase, and this is actually, like, something that we're struggling with, and it's not just
Mhm.
something we can chalk up to hormones anymore, and it's like, okay. And then that's
Yeah.
also the point where, like, decisions really affect you in a big way because you're starting to become a true adult, and so, yeah, I kinda got mine in that same time frame. I think that's funny that we both had the same same time frame.
No, absolutely. And on your point about like hormonal, like we always kind of label it as like, oh, yeah, I was just going through a phase. I'm just emotional. And that's what I was saying like the whole time, like even like through 16, 17, 18. I'm like, oh, it's just a teenage thing. But then when I got diagnosed, I'm like, oh yeah, that wasn't a teenage thing. That was like a legit mental breakdown I had, but I just wrote it off. So, but
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. And then once you have, I feel like the beauty of having the diagnosis, I feel like it's a hard line to walk because we don't want to over identify. And that's something that I definitely went through. But when we don't have a diagnosis, we don't really have the tools that we need and the
Mhm.
information that we need to get better and to start developing those coping skills and strategies. So I think at the end of the day, a diagnosis is one of the most essential things because it gives you like a jumping off point and a starting point.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I would say that my third moment would be trigger warning for people who are dealing with suicidal ideation, by the way, was after her attempt, and just her being in the hospital with Paula and her therapist, Dr. Akopian, and she's just saying, like, Rebecca's like, oh my gosh, like, I feel like such a coward, like I let everybody down, and they're both reassuring her like, no, you were just going through a very rough time and it's normal to have these feelings, you just need the appropriate help. And when I tell you that I cried when that happened, because I'm like, wow, people who have like, survived the attempt, it's just like it's often labeled as like, oh, why were you like in that state to begin with? And it's like a lot of judgment. And just the fact that they were like, no, it's okay. It's normal. And it's all right to feel sad. And it's all right that you survived. It's not a bad thing. And that was just so touching for me. But yeah, that would round out my top 3
That made
moments.
me very emotional. Just her and Paula's relationship and how far it comes, developing from like a codependent, unhealthy dynamic to them having like a genuine friendship. I think it's a really beautiful friendship arc that you see.
Yes, absolutely. So my next question would be, which moments, well, we kind of talked about it, but do you have any like additional moments that you felt accurately depicted mental health?
I would say, oh my gosh, Greg's character development was amazing. And we're also going to get into the fact that they switched Gregs halfway
Oh,
through, and that made us angry. But the first Greg, I very much related to and resonated with because I went through addiction recovery. I mean, I'm still going through addiction recovery. It started about 4 years ago, is when my addiction started. And then about 2 years ago, I started the process of getting clean and getting help. And so when Greg sings his song, Greg's drinking song, I really felt seen by that because he's talking about how most people go out, they have a few drinks, and that's that. But for him, it's completely different. That's not his experience. When he goes out, he ruins his life and has sex with a
mm,
bush and like does all of these things. And so it's a very good and light, like I like that it's so light when they're talking about it because addiction can be such a heavy and hard to talk about thing, and I think that's what keeps it stigmatized is it's so awkward and hard to talk about. But if
mm.
we just normalize it and talk about it openly, then we're set, and that's exactly what they did in that song.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I really, really love that. And especially because like it depicted like the awkwardness of it, because the context of that scene is like they were just sitting down having lunch together when he was having lunch with his friends, and they're just like, yo dude, you got an issue because every time we go drinking you get into some shenanigans. And then he just breaks out in song. And I was watching it while my mom was around, and I'm just like, ooh, talk about having sex with a bush. I was like, all right, I need to turn this off right
Oh
now.
my gosh. Good thing that she wasn't watching with you in the first Penis I Saw one either, because there are like a few songs that I'm like, if Mama saw.
Oh my god. Yeah, from then on, I've only watched that show with like headphones in on my computer, because I'm like, yeah, this is
You
gonna be.
never know.
Yeah. It's so true. But like, yeah, I really do love that that song resonated with you, because it just depicts for like me also the awkwardness of like coming forward with your friends about your like addiction or mental health condition, or even them acknowledging it and trying to tell you like, hey bro, like you need to do something, you
Yeah,
know?
there's a problem. They talk at the end about how like him quitting drinking is saving his car, and the other guy's like, my car too, and he was like, my car too. The amount of relatable. I feel like it's the best thing about Crazy Ex-Girlfriend is it really doesn't take itself that seriously. And so even in these like deep, dark, heartfelt moments, there's still like a light, playful tone. And I think it makes
Yeah.
these really hard things to talk about, like suicide ideation, like self-harm, like abusive relationships. It takes that and it makes it more digestible for people.
Right. Yeah. No, definitely. And I would say, like, for me, and a moment that depicted mental health accurately was just seeing Valencia so vulnerable the first time, like, after she and Josh break up. Like, just seeing Valencia, because we're first introduced to her as, you know, Josh's girlfriend. She's the enemy, but she's like sexy. She's like got a fit body. She does yoga. She's a yoga instructor. And we see her as this like super powerful, unstoppable force. And then after she and Josh break up, it's like she gained weight. Like she's just sluggish. She's like, I don't care about anything. She has a messy bun and a t shirt. Like totally different Valencia. And honestly, it kind of like even has like a subtext of like, we mostly judge people based on what we can see, especially like with social media as well. Like now they're on the topic of media, but it's like the image that we present to the world is not really the image that we have on a daily basis, you know? And I just really love that we got to see Valencia in that moment, because when she was first introduced, even me watching the show, I was like, wait a minute, does this girl have an off day? Like,
So two-dimensional at first. I was like, they just didn't give her like a very good like character. But then as it develops and you start to see her more authentically, and then her coming into her sexuality, then you're like, oh, this is great. This is the Valencia we're here for.
yes, yes. Yeah, I agree. Like her character arc was so good. Like cuz I mean, she was like the angle was that you were supposed to hate her because, you know, Rebecca's the protagonist and everything like that. But at the same time, it's like when you see her in that vulnerable state, you're like, wow, she's a woman that has feelings. She has like, you know, empathy, and she's going through a rough time, you know? So I really like that moment as well.
And I think that Josh's character, even though I thought he was going to have no growth, by then you're like, oh my gosh, even he came into some self awareness there at the end. Oh my god.
Yes. Oh my god, him going to therapy and then saying the things that he's learned in therapy. I was like, this is so off brand for Josh, but it's cool to see.
But it's good to see that growth. Exactly. I really like how the show highlights her relationships, because I think a very important and integral part of VPD is the relationship dynamic and having those
Mm,
chaotic, volatile relationships that kind of rise and fall. And one of the most beautiful scenes I think in the entire show is at the very end where Rebecca is about to make her decision on which guy she wants to be with out of the three. And it shows you
mhm.
her envisioning a life which with each of the three guys. And at the end of every single scene, her character looks so sad, and she's in there, she's like runs in talking to future her, and she's like, why are you sad, like why are you upset in every single one of these scenarios, like what would make you happy? And then it finally all hits her at once, like, oh my god, I'm not unhappy because of this. I'm unhappy because I am unhappy. I've been putting it onto other people, I've been putting it onto other situations, but happiness is actually an inside thing. And there's actually stuff going on with me personally. And that's when the whole show, I feel like, kind of is just like,
Yes. No, I definitely agree with that. And it's also a nice callback to the very first episode when there was this like ad for butter. And it's like, it was just the most like invasive butter commercial I've ever seen. But it's just like, it was like, they're spreading the butter over the bread and they're like, when was the last time that you were truly happy? And then after she saw that commercial, she's like, yeah, when was the last time I was truly happy? And I was just like, wow, like that's so true though. It's just like when you're actually faced with that question, it's just like, when was the last time that I actually was truly happy? You know?
and then all of
And
a sudden you're like, goodness, when was the last time actually?
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's the thinking about it for me. It's like, yeah, I actually have to think and assess about this. But no, but getting to your point about like her seeing like the lives that she could be living with these like three different guys like Greg, Nathaniel, and Josh, and just seeing that she's not happy in any of them. And it's not because like she's not happy with this person specifically, but like you said, it's because I internally am not happy and nobody could make you happy. Like it has to come from you. Like you could be surrounded by so many happy people laughing and talking and joking around, but if you yourself are not feeling it internally, you're just not happy in the moment. And I really love how they're just like, it's not a issue with anybody else, it's an issue that I'm dealing with internally. So I love that.
Are y'all taking notes? Because Queen is preaching. Like, these are some, y'all should be like notebook in hand right now, I hope.
Yeah, grab a notebook and come back.
Time for your notes, time for your homework.
Most definitely. But I just want to go into like how the show has helped you get in touch with your own mental health. I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but is there any like aspect of the show itself that like when you watched it, you're like, wow, I feel seen, I feel known. Like, what was that for you?
So the music is definitely it for me. 100%. I still listen to the music from that show every single day because there are just songs that say things that I've been thinking my entire life and no one ever said it. And sometimes it's in a very serious way, like The Darkness, and sometimes it's in a really silly way, like some of the funnier songs, but like they all just make me feel very validated. And also a part of the borderline personality disorder experience is having very intense emotions and struggling to regulate them. And one of my favorite coping skills when I'm feeling dysregulated is putting on show tunes and singing and just going to town and singing my little butt off and just like, yeah, just doing it because that helps me get those emotions out of me and out of my mind and into the world and into music. And so I would definitely say the music and all of the songs were so well written. I think it's like 170 something books in the songbook. So well,
Yes.
for them, they're amazing.
Yes, yes, I definitely agree. And that was actually a perfect segue into my next question. Like, do you have like a specific like musical number or like specific songs in general that kind of like spoke to you?
Yeah, yeah, several. Okay, so there's a random song in season 3, and it's right when Rebecca like lands in jail, and she's singing a song called "No One Else Is Singing My Song," and at the same time, Josh is singing that song and Nathaniel's singing that song, and they're all singing together, but nobody knows it, and so it's like such a funny and like relatable scene that every person is standing there shouting into the void, like, "Why am I so alone? Why am I the only one who feels this way?" Meanwhile, we're all doing the same thing. And so it's kind of like those comedic moments that really, really get to me. I would say another one that I really, really liked. Oh, there's a song called "This Was a Shit Show," and it's about Greg and Rebecca's breakup. And in the
Mm-hmm.
song, he's just like, "This was a mess. This was a disaster. Goodbye. Like, we tried our best. I'm always going to love you, but heck no, we're out of here." And I think that one was like really relatable for me as someone who's been a toxic partner so many times and has had so many people walk out and be like, okay, we're done. You need to fix your mental health. That scene and watching him walk away from her, I was like, I've been there, and I know that pain of like wanting someone so bad but just not being in the space to be together.
Yes. I really love, like, some of the, like, that the musicals, they kind of elevate the show. And it's so funny because when I was first watching it on Netflix, I was like, "Oh, what's this? Crazy Ex-Girlfriend." I decided to check it out, and then she just burst into song, and I was like, "Oh, I had no idea it was a musical." So I'm like, "Wow, this is a surprise. I don't know what I'm
Let's
getting."
go, Venus.
But yeah.
I
But
literally remember
for
the first episode, I was like, there's a pretzel and people are dancing. I was like, I don't know what to expect, but I'm so here for it. Somehow they got me from episode one.
Yes, no, same here. Like West Covina, California, like that entire like musical number was amazing. But I do have like just like maybe two or three that were kind of like, very like palpable for me and I related to a lot. The first one is Antidepressants Are So Not a Big Deal. I really like that song because that I saw that at a time where I was like actually debating on whether or not I should take antidepressants. Um Spoiler alert, I have to take them. But like yeah, but that song, it was just like, just telling you like, hey, it's okay if you have to take medication. It's okay if it doesn't work the first time. It's okay if you have to search for a combination that works for you, and that song was just so liberating because I was like, oh, okay, like people are actually voicing the things that I haven't gotten to say or even put words to. So that was good for that one. And I just love the creative way that they started introducing the medicines. They're like fluoxetine, fluoxetine, pervoxetine, pervoxetine. Yeah. That was crazy.
No,
Yes.
you're so right. I feel like the way that they made that song light too was like super, super important because talking about psych medication can be hard for some people. And so being like the way they tap dance and are just like going to town, like it just made it such a fun song. It just gets stuck in my head walking around.
Yes, absolutely. And another one that's kind of like a not really a downer, but it's kind of funny, but You Stupid Bee. Like that song, oh my god, it was just so funny because it's like a self-loathing type of song. Like she's just like, "Oh my gosh, you stupid bee, like you always ruin everything and you just suck and you're fat and ugly." Like she's just going to town, but then it's like the way that the song is portrayed, it's just like this big musical ballad and it's just like the orchestra's behind her and she's wearing this wonderful gown and she's just singing about how much she hates herself, but it's just like, oh my gosh, the song is so beautifully put together. So it's like,
And when she goes, sing along, you guys know this part.
for real, she's like, this one, and then she's like, yes, I deserve this.
It's so funny because when I am spiraling into a self-loathing and a shameful episode, I will 100% do that. Like, yes, I deserve this. Like, give me all of
Yeah.
the hurt.
Yeah, no, most definitely. Like I have those moments, but it's just like just hearing someone else sing it about themselves. They're just like, "Oh no, like is this what I sound like internally?"
My internal dialogue.
Yes, it's that song. That's what's running through my mind
I think
24/7.
that's one of the more powerful songs in the whole show because it just like really captures like that journey that she takes from like really hating herself to being like, okay, I'm not perfect, I'm human, I'm flawed, but I'm still gonna like myself and I'm still going to work toward that feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also love Heather's song, where she was singing
Moment is
about like
me.
yes, yes, yes. The moment is me. Like I really resonated with that one because it's funny the timing of all these episodes, but I was watching this one right like as I was about to graduate college and as I was about to graduate college during a pandemic. So yeah, I was like, oh my God, where do I go from here? What do I do? And then she just starts singing that song about like how nervous she is about her future and like how she's defined herself as so many different roles before. And then she's just like, okay, what do I do now that those roles are changing? Because she's always been a student. And they make a joke about it where she's been a student for so long that they're like, yo, dude, you got to graduate because like, You've
When I
taken
watch
every
her
class.
describe herself, she's always like, "I'm a student."
Yeah, she's like, I'm a student. And then, just seeing her go into the corporate world and try to find herself and like what she wants to do with her career, that was just so relatable. And it's just an amazing, amazing song.
Amazing. And her character development, I also like. You think that she's always just going to be like the exact same version of herself, and then she just goes and does career things and then gives birth to a baby. Like, she does it all. Like,
Right. I was like, wow, okay, Heather. Like,
there.
yeah, most definitely. Like I was like, wow, I didn't see that coming. But speaking of character development, perfect segue. Which character do you relate to the most in terms of like his or her storyline in the show and why?
Okay, I would say I'm like 80% Rebecca just because my biggest problem is relationships. I've been working through that for a long time. I just have struggles with codependency and then substance stuff that I've had to work through. And so I would say probably Rebecca, but then also a little bit of Greg because a couple of years ago, pulled a mid season swap out just like Greg did, where I just had to bounce and vanish for a while to go get my life together. And so I feel like I relate to both of their storylines, but especially Rebecca, because just like having it's not even just having the BPD with her, but the way that she sees the world as a musical, I relate to that so much. I will have headphones in and I am just seeing the world like it is a in lifetime musical. And so seeing it through her vision, I was like, I'm not the only one who does this. Like, wow.
No, absolutely. Like I would say that I'm like it's a 50-50 for me between Rebecca and Paula. Because I relate to Rebecca because, of the way that she deals with self-loathing and her perfectionism and just like learning about how to manage her mental health. Like I was literally Rebecca years ago where I was like, okay, no, I'm done with the medicine. I'm done with the therapy. Like I've done it. It's not working, so I'm gonna just live my life. And then fast forward, God's like, no, like you have bipolar disorder, you gotta sit down. So
Give me the reins, baby. Let me take over here for a second.
right, it's like, yeah, you're crashing and burning. Let me land this plane, okay? but but no, in all seriousness, like Rebecca, her journey to just learning how to love herself in the midst of like her pain, in the midst of like the diagnosis and dealing with that and going through like just what treatment plans work for her, I definitely related with that. And for Paula, I relate to Paula in terms of like her career goals, her aspirations, and the fact that she just keeps pushing no matter what, and it even led to her almost dying because she was pushing so hard and she had a heart attack and she didn't even know that she was having a heart attack. Like she was walking around just like doing her work, studying, doing a whole bunch of things, and she just didn't take time to take care of herself. And that is relatable for me because I feel like that's how I got into the manic attack in the first place, because I wasn't taking care of myself. I was just pushing and pushing and pushing and not really giving myself the time or the space to kind of process what I was feeling. I would just stuff it down and just be like, let's keep moving because I don't got time to be sad. I don't got time to be anxious or angry. Like, I'm just keep moving. So, yeah.
I mean, I feel like you have such a strong, you can tell that you have a great support system and that you have a great faith and that you have all of the things that it takes to get through something like this. And you have all of the necessary things in place, which I think is such an amazing thing. And it probably helps you just like be in this position where you can lead and support others through your podcast, which is just awesome.
Oh, and yeah, thank you. But yeah, how could I forget that? But yeah, like
Yeah.
the support system. No, but that's really, really important to have like a good support system. And like we were saying earlier, like through Rebecca and Paula, their friendship, it starts out being very codependent. Like Rebecca's friends with Paula because she could get information on Josh and sabotage his life. And then Paula is friends with Rebecca because she's literally living her fantasy, like her romance fantasy through her. And it was just like very codependent at first. But then as they gotten to know each other and become vulnerable with each other, they've really become to support one another and even like tell each other the hard truths about who they are and how they could be better. So, yeah, I shout out to my support system, like my mom, my sister, church family, mentors, friends, college friends, like all of you lovely people who constantly support me. Thank you so much for just like rallying around me, even when I didn't want to hear it. Like, you guys still showed up, and that's very powerful, you know?
That's so beautiful and so, so important. And I think that like all of the things you were listing off are exactly where I try to go to. Mentors, so, so powerful, so life changing. And the people of the
Mhm.
church are amazing. I haven't been a regular churchgoer in a while, but I do come back to my church for some things. And I came back a few weeks ago for a charity event that we're doing to raise money for a trip to Nicaragua that the church is going on. And I asked if I could like come with and help with the kids, and they were like, sure. So I'm going to Nicaragua to do some work and I'm very excited. And just being surrounded by people from the church again for the first time in like 5 years, I was like, whoa, everyone has just a very gorgeous heart. Like everyone is just very like, how are you? How have you been? Oh my gosh, it's so good to see you. Welcome back. I was a little worried about like feeling some resistance and like, oh, you've been gone for a while. But I did not have that experience with my church family. They were like, come here, give us a hug.
Oh, I love that because I that's what I wanted to do with the podcast to kind of talk about faith and mental health because I really believe that the two can intersect and that they should intersect because it's like yeah, the church community like some churches are better than others at like catering to mental health because honestly my experience of my church family they're kind of like closed minded on a lot of things when it comes to mental health, so it was like a little bit tough to kind of get them to see like hey this is not like a spiritual demonic attack, like it's actually a scientific like ailment in the brain, like it's not it's like God didn't abandon me, it's just I had like a chemical imbalance in my brain, so we're getting there but it needs a little more work in my opinion.
And some love. I feel like I'm pretty fortunate with my church. It's just a very like progressive, it's pretty new age, and I feel like sometimes I forget that there are places that are still like a little bit further behind on the timeline. But having people like you as that kind of like bridge and that connector, I think is so important. So thank you for the work that you're doing there too and just like literally bringing different communities together.
No, absolutely. And I'm so happy to hear that you do have a church community that you can go to because that is like really huge. Because a lot of the times it's like people, their first like aspect of community is church. Like they don't go to a therapist immediately, they don't go to like psychiatrists immediately. Like they come to church. And so when we don't have like a good representation of like how we handle mental health in light of our faith, it kind of like steers people away from that and even like not even exploring mental health in general. So yeah, but I'm grateful that you do have a good church community because we need more of them.
Yeah. And I think that it's beautiful that they allow me to come back after drifting away from my faith and after going through different changes in the way that I viewed different things. And just like the fact that they hold space for me and I hold space for them, even if we are not completely identical, I think is amazing. And that's always what I've thought like spirituality and religion both are about just loving each other, loving our neighbors, doing what we can, and trying to be the best versions of ourselves.
Absolutely. I agree. Like we just need to put the humanity back in Christianity for me cuz I'm like we just need to love each other as people because that's what Jesus did. He loved other people as people. Like he didn't say, "Oh, come to me all who are perfect, all who have their lives together." Like, you know what I mean? Like he said all who are weary, burdened, stressed out, burnt out, come to me, you know?
Sinners, bring them sinners to the yard. And I said, okay, on my way. That's me.
It's like, okay, I'm on my way.
You're
I
literally
love
talking
that.
about everything in such a kind light. I think it's just very amazing what you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much. But before we end, I do have one more question to ask you. So, what advice or words of encouragement do you have for people who are struggling to manage their mental health conditions or want to learn more but don't know where to start?
Yeah. So if you are at rock bottom or you're feeling at rock bottom, I want you to know, first of all, that you are not alone there. I have been there many times. I've been down further into the depths than I ever could have imagined. And I got out of it. And I'm in the process of turning my life into something that I'm really proud of and that I really love. And so I think the first thing is just kind of accepting where you're at and going, okay, I need help, and recognizing that it is okay and it is safe for you to need help. A great resource that I always tell people is calling 988, calling Lifeline. And even if you just want resources, telling your crisis worker, like, hey, I could use some websites, or maybe you could help me look up some therapists in my area, and just not being afraid to put it out there into the universe and into the world or to God or whoever you talk to, that you need some help and that you are open to receiving it. Because in those moments where we're like, okay, I'm ready for help, then we get sent a sign or a person or something that lets us know, like, we're not alone in this. It's very, very hard and very dark sometimes, but there are people here that are sent to light our path along the way, and they're there to hold us and support us in those dark times. So if you are feeling like this is never going to get better, this is never going to get better, I encourage you to, first of all, give yourself a big hug, and second of all, recognize that there are people out there who are waiting for you and want to help you and want to be in a community with you. You just have to find them.
Yes, I definitely agree. Thank you for such like your just powerful wisdom. I'm just blown away by that. So thank you so much for just joining me and like fangirling about Crazy Ex-Girlfriend
Was
and
very
everything.
fun. This was such a fun episode. Like, it was 50-50 super fun and like silly, and then 50 like super powerful and like, dang, I really felt that.
Yes, yes. And Allison, where could the listeners find you if they want to know more?
Yeah, if you're curious about my podcast, I'm on Instagram at wishyouwell.podcast. I also have a lot of free resources on my website, which is XOXO with two L's coaching.com. And if you go there and click the resource tab, I have numbers for the crisis hotline. I have a depression and bipolar alliance source. I have a couple of, I have, who is it? Megan Trainor, I think, has a database of all these mental health resources. It's called Bad Bees Have Bad Days Too. I think she's amazing. I know you need to check it out. It's
Whoa.
good. It's good.
Okay, I will check that out. But thank you so much, Allison, for joining me. And everyone, stay tuned for more empowering episodes on Rough Edges. Thank you for listening to Rough Edges. This podcast is available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, and more. For more updates on the Rough Edges podcast, please follow on Instagram at rough.edges.podcast. You can also visit the official podcast website at www.roughedgespodcast.com. If you have any questions or further suggestions for how this podcast can grow, please email at rough.edges.podcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening and have a wonderful day.